I wanted to come back on and share about the spontaneous Kundalini awakening, spiritual awakening that I mentioned in my earlier video that happened 22 years ago when I was around 28. Yeah, a major life experience, transformation. And at the time I was living in Melbourne, working in advertising and marketing. And I had actually made a conscious decision to stop taking recreational drugs. So I had been taking ecstasy and going to dance parties and basically escaping life that way, or escaping myself, let's say. And when I made that decision to stop, I think there was a level of self-awareness that came through, a bit of a tap on the shoulder. I had ended up in hospital with dehydration after a weekend of partying, and I was getting quite thin. And yeah, there was a part of me, I would potentially say my higher self, that was tapping me on the shoulder saying, you know, enough is enough. And maybe within a few months of making that decision, I actually went to the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra with my parents, and we were sitting there and it was very quiet, and they had said over the speaker that they were recording the event because, actually to be very quiet, for the audience to be very quiet, because they were recording that evening. And then I guess they started to tune their instruments, and it was the first note that was played that actually activated my Kundalini energy. And I had no knowledge or idea of actually that this is what was happening. I guess it could also be seen as a spiritual awakening. And what the feeling had was that I was just sitting there, and this just wave of energy sort of rose in me. It's very hard to explain and put into words, but it was a massive amount of life force energy. And the only experience that I could connected to was being on ecstasy, because I had experienced that. So there was this sort of mass of energy and feeling of ecstasy. But what happened for me is, because I hadn't taken any ecstasy, my brain kicked in and was like, what is going on? This is not okay. You haven't taken any drugs. What is happening? So I sort of went into this state of, all I remember thinking at the time was I felt like I was like a deer in headlights. Like all my senses were on hyperdrive, I guess you could say. Everything was brighter, sounds were more vivid, touch was more sensitive. And I remember just sitting there very, very still, just literally my eyes probably just popping out of my head and just going, what the fuck is happening? And I must have managed it in that moment, okay, because there was an interval and I went with my parents, I think potentially to have a glass of champagne. I can't remember drinking it. And I think I just spoke quite normally to my parents, but in this heightened state, but I didn't say anything. And I was just trying to sort of deal with it. And I went home that evening, and the next month or so was a bit of a blur, because what happened was that energy never quietened or softened. I stayed in that state of high alert, and then with my brain panicking, so was having a lot of panic attacks. And I pretty much got to the point where I became agoraphobic, and was scared to leave the house, and couldn't go to work. And so I did speak to my mum, who actually took me to a GP. And, you know, having no understanding of this themselves, I had no spiritual background. I'd only started doing a little bit of yoga. Potentially, when I had been on ecstasy, that had awakened the Kundalini, but I didn't have that reference either. So what happened was I was diagnosed with anxiety and panic attacks and put on antidepressants. I think it was Zoloft, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. But what happened with that was then I couldn't sleep, so I was put on sleeping tablets. And I remember once looking in the mirror and just looking at my eyes, and my pupils were just huge, and I was like, whoa. And the other reason that I did go on the antidepressants was I thought I was going to be in psychosis and potentially end up in a mental health institution. So yeah, that was the start of my spiritual awakening. And I did end up I went back to work, and then I did finish up leaving my job, and I had been up to Byron Bay not that long before this happened. And I then made the decision to actually go overseas, because I was trying to decide whether I knew I wanted to leave Melbourne and the life that I led there. And I went back to England, where I had been living a few years prior. I also did a little trip to the States. And I did come off the antidepressants during that time. I came off them slowly, and it was actually all fine. And I came back to Australia and made this decision to move up to Byron Bay, where I am now. So I don't want to make this video too long, because there's so much to share about that experience. It was huge. And I think I'm probably still integrating that experience and other experiences. Many experiences, energetic experiences, have happened since then. And I would like to share more about that, in the hope that if these videos reach anyone who's had a similar experience, or is looking for support, or just wanting to talk to someone, or to feel that they're not alone. I do remember actually watching some videos on YouTube. I'll find the link and put it in here. And there was someone who was doing studies on bipolar disorder and spiritual awakening. And there's a connection there. I also did buy a couple of books down the track. I don't know if these will come up. I think it's going to come up backwards, so I'll just read it. The Stormy Search for the Self, A Guide to Personal Growth Through Transformational Crisis, by Christina Groff and Stanislav Groff. And they also wrote, I think it's going to be back to front as well, Spiritual Emergence, When Personal Transformation Becomes a Crisis. And I remember buying these books further down the track, quite a few years. And I was like, wow, I wish I'd come across these when it first happened. But all is in perfect timing. So I remember buying them. I started to read them. And they would have been brilliant when I first had my awakening. And then I ended up actually never reading them. But I love having them. Yeah, just the vibration of them with what I went through. I just enjoyed having them around, and they're still in my bookshelf. So I'm going to leave it there for now. That is the beginning of my spontaneous Kundalini awakening / spiritual awakening. That's the best way I know how to explain it, with 22 years of having different mentors and teachers, and speaking to so many people, watching podcasts, and so yes, please reach out if you have any questions. I would love to share more, and I will share some more videos on this journey.